To you all. Can you hear me in the back? Can you just raise your hand if you can hear me? Hi, good afternoon. I'm super excited for today because for the first time ever, we have an African panel discussion at the Odoo Experience, in which our panelists are going to share with you the insights and strategies to win big in Africa. My name is Cedric Jr. I'm the moderator of this panel discussion. And if you, just for us to start, if you have any questions, you can scan the QR code that you see here and submit your question. So let's dive into the discussion. First, I want to share this picture with you because when we speak about international expansion, often Africa is left out of the conversation. It's not because Africa has no potential or there is no market condition for it. It's simply overlooked. This is based on false narratives. And today, our panelists are here to provide you the necessary information for you to understand why Africa is the future. They're going to provide you valuable insights, actionable strategies, and how you can take your first steps towards the African market. So, to start this discussion, I will first ask each of you to shortly introduce yourself, starting with Marine.
Hi everyone, so my name is Marine Berthiel, so I'm the group finance manager for Anzana Electric Group. And what we do is that we develop power generation projects and grid lines in East Africa. So our mission is to bring affordable and renewable power to African communities.
Thank you very much. Then we're moving on to Nelson.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Nelson. I'm the founder and CEO of Zarttech. We're a team of about 200 employees, mostly from Africa, but we've got the HQ in the Netherlands. I grew up between the West and also with a lot of exposure to Africa, and I've really taken it upon myself to look for ways to connect the West to Africa and Africa to the West as well, because I think there's mutual benefit on both sides. So I'll be happy to give you practical knowledge on how things work in Africa, also some opportunities in alignment to how things work in Europe. And of course, if you also have more questions after this conversation, I'll be happy to also connect to discuss further. Thanks.
Yes, and then I want to move on to Douwe.
Nice to be here. I'm Douwe van Loenen. I'm director at Advanced Insight. We're an Odoo implementer in East Africa. We're a gold partner in Kenya, and we were just awarded Best Partner Africa 2024 for the second year in a row. Thank you. Last night. I've been working in, I started my career 20 years ago in Cameroon, in West Africa, and I've kind of never left. And we currently support SMEs in East and West Africa with implementing Odoo and digital transformation.
Yes, last but not least, I want to introduce my colleague, Patrick.
Thank you, Cedric. Good afternoon, everyone. We are glad to see you here today, especially on a Friday at 2 p.m. So congratulations, you survived it. I want first to start by thanking my co-panelists here today for the insights that they are bringing to us. Yes, my name is Patrick Lukusa. I'm Congolese. I'm now based in Nairobi, where we have our Odoo office for all of Africa so far. From there, we are managing pretty much all of the countries except a few ones that are being managed by our other offices, like the Dubai office or Belgium. Just a few words on, I would say, my work prior to Odoo. I used to evolve in the mining sector in Congo. And then I lived some time in Belgium, where I was working with the headquarters. And now we are furthering the business of Odoo in Africa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the brief introduction. Guys, let's dive into it. I will ask you a question that I often get myself. Is when we are in social gathering and you mention that you work in Africa, people always ask, why Africa? So any of you wants to take this question?
I think why not Africa? Because if you take a look at the whole global population, and also if you look at the future population as well, 1 out of every 5 people at the moment now are from Africa. So if you count 5 of us over here, 1 out of every 5 will be from Africa. That's the relativity of African populations to the rest of the world. And then in the future, it's going to be 1 out of every 4 people. And this is a huge buying populations in terms of like they make money and then they spend the money. So multiplication effect in terms of economical factors is really, really, really huge. And the adoption of technology as well is fast growing, and there's just so much on tap, I think, opportunities and possibilities. So why not, especially if you're looking for brilliancy, scalability in your business.
Great.
I would add to that also that, well, it's fast growing also in terms of urbanization and in terms of infrastructure. So what we are doing as Anzana is that we are trying to feed this need for electricity, not only in cities but also in rural communities, so that people, they can make their life easier, but also maybe start some small businesses. So yeah, there are definitely lots of opportunities because this continent is huge. It's actually 54 countries with a lot of diversified cultures, people, languages. So like a potential like huge market.
Yes.
I think it's also a lot of fun. I worked and I lived in Kampala for 4 years, and when I came back, I found the Netherlands very boring. You know, everything is running, everything is okay. There's not a lot of room for improvement. And I think a lot of the companies that we work with, we can add a lot of value. And we actually work with a lot of companies that already do well and they're profitable, but they use Excel or bad systems. And can you imagine what they can do if they get their hands on something like Odoo? We can really add a lot of value, and it's never boring. It's never boring.
Yes.
Maybe I will come back on what my co-panelists are saying. I think Nelson started by saying, why not? And that question is really important. He talked about the population. We have like 1.6 billion souls, people living in Africa. And all of those people need to be fed, to be transported, to be housed, to be connected to the internet and so on. And who is there to do that? Companies, SMEs. We have a lot of SMEs that will champion the majority of the economy, and sometimes they need decent tools to be working efficiently and so on. So if you look at it that way, you can see a lot of opportunities. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it. But I like what Douwe said. There's also some fun.
Yeah.
Some fun not in enjoying the sun, because most people will look Africa, then they see a safari or something, especially if you are living in Kenya. But there is fun in doing something that is meaningful. Right, the level of impact that you have when there is pretty much nothing compared to the impact you can do in a saturated market is quite different. So you can see the impacts quite fast, and that impact is also huge. That's what we see, why we are going to Africa.
Yes, thank you very much. Guys, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. We know we are giving us a beautiful talk, Hakuna Matata, and so on. But let's dive deep into the reality of actually doing business in Africa. So what would you say is the difference between the myths about doing business in Africa and the actual reality of operating in Africa?
Well, I think one of the main ones is that there is a lot of business in Africa. And we're a commercial company. We work with companies. They pay us. And sometimes if I tell that, it's like, but it's not all grant funded. And no, these are companies that pay us good money to work with them. Yeah. And there is a lot of business to do. And I think that's one of the biggest ones, that a lot of things are happening. And also connecting with your point, growth is in Africa. It's not in Europe. Yeah. We've become a bit complacent and slow.
So that's why you're positioning yourself for the future in Africa. That's a good one. Yeah.
Also, maybe one thing I want to say is that there is maybe also like a myth that like African people cannot do things, that they are not trained, they are not skilled to do that. But actually, well, they are well trained, they are well educated. They know a lot about technologies. They use more like fast advanced technologies than we do in Europe. Like we see, like for example, with the mobile money payments. Well, they started that like way before us. So well, they started from zero, but they already went through like all those tech solutions maybe before us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think really excellent point from you guys. Um, from my point of view, I think there is a reality, right? And the reality is that there's difference in culture. Africa is a very big place. It's full of bunch of people with different beliefs from different. Yeah, so Africa is not just one country, but it's a whole continent of different mindsets as well. And then, of course, you have Europe as well, which is also a bunch of different cultures as well. And when you want to collaborate with Africa or with people from different countries in Africa, it's also not an organic match because there's always a difference in perspective, in culture, in how we were brought up. I think it's always important to be aware of that and not have the same kind of expectation that you're used to in an European mindset. And I think that's some of the pitfall in terms of the mind that people just expect that it's going to be an organic fit and without actually being gracious enough that we all have different backgrounds and different perspective. But then if you can look past those differences and also be patient, or maybe you're well equipped to actually do better integration and understand different culture and mindset, then you can really, really tap into the potential of Africa, which is also what some of my panelists have said, which include, let's say, the youthfulness, the enthusiastic of people, and the entrepreneurial mindset it can do, attitude, the self-learning mindset. Like, if you want, let's say, a delivery overnight, they wouldn't even, they will be the one to volunteer and say, you know what, we've got it. And those kind of potential is something that is really, really, really very rare to find in different parts of the world when it comes to, let's say, human capital, or when it even comes to even the market potential as well, and all kinds of places. But you need to also first maybe understand the dynamics of the difference in culture, and also be open to actually navigate that to be able to then see to the real potential that the market has to offer.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe I will
Patrick?
share three myths. One, which is maybe not very obvious, is that Africa is a continent, not a country. When we had the project of opening an office in Africa, first we were thinking of just opening an office in Africa. But when it becomes real, you start to ask yourself the question, where in Africa? Is it in Egypt? Is it in the Congos? Is it in Angola?
Yeah.
Right? And you'll find out really quick that it can be very different in terms of culture, you refer to it, in terms of available infrastructure, in terms of ease of doing business in the different regions. So you start to look for statistics, you start to look for other things. So it's one of the things that are mostly not talked about.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of myths, I think the myths are coming sometimes from some reality somehow. It's simply that people will exaggerate them. With time, I come across people who are at the two extremes.
Yeah.
People who would think that.
Can you give an example of this exaggeration of a situation in Africa?
Yes, there are plenty. I'll just take a few ones which are also extreme, but it will help to illustrate that. People would tend to think that as a company coming from outside of Africa, it's impossible to succeed in Africa without having someone coming from there and so on.
Mm-hmm.
On the other extreme, people will think that, okay, if I'm coming from advanced countries with brand new technologies, with management, I would say, policies, it will be a breeze, a walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
But what you find out is, okay, that maybe will position you in a good, for a good start, but then you need to do the deep work of every entrepreneur, be it in Asia, Latin America, and so on. It's simply that you'll have some local flavors, I like to say it that way, some local, I would say, specificities that you need to consider. One of them is the culture, but then you have the supports, institutional supports that you can get, finance supports in terms of banking and so on that you need to consider in the context of the place you go to in the whole of Africa.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think maybe just to add to your point, this came to my mind. A lot of time when people think about Africa, they really think of a small highland or maybe like a small jungle, right? For example, a lot of people come to me and say, like tonight I'm flying to Nigeria. Right after this, I'm heading to the airport and flying to Nigeria. And people will be like, but Nigeria is not safe, and the likes. And then I'm like, well, Nigeria is like, I think the total size of Nigeria is about 200 million population. And the EU population is 450 million. That's like half of the whole EU. 6 hours of flight away from other kind of business districts where actually business are really happening. So it's not like it's one small island, and a lot of times they take all this news in the news to the extreme, and people don't bother to actually educate themselves with the actual fact or do basic research to actually self-learn, and they miss out on all these kind of potential and possibilities that we are all here tapping into. And it's also more about the social standpoint that we also all here want to actually contribute into, because when we also allow those kind of misinformation to guide us, then we also prevent our own role that we play in actually being able to move this impact as well to Africa or vice versa. So I think it's quite an interesting point indeed. Yeah.
Douwe?
I think an important one is also that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, and that's one of the main challenges. But what we have really seen is if you bring the opportunity, the talent is there. So it's not that it's not there are not enough opportunities. And we see it with the companies we work with, we see it with the team. We're really able to build a good team in Kenya that can rival some European Odoo partners out there. So if you just bring the opportunities, then a lot of stuff, including talent, will follow.
Just clarification.
I would just like
Yeah?
to highlight
Okay.
what I was saying about the extremes of it's difficult for a foreign company out of Africa to
Yes.
come and do business. If you take the case of Kenya, I was discussing with my fellow colleagues here. If you go to Nairobi, for example, you have all of the big companies like Google,
Yes.
Microsoft, Oracle. If there was nothing for them there, they wouldn't be there. It's not; these are not NGOs, right?
Yeah.
You also have a lot of NGOs. So there's something somewhere that they have seen and which they are actually tapping into.
Yes. Just to a clarifying question, Marine, you work for Anzana Electric Group, and one of the questions that I get from directors and CEOs is, where can we go to find the right information? Because in Europe, most of the information is information-based. And how was it for Anzana Group to take that decision to establish itself in 5 African countries?
Well, I think you have to be on the ground, go to those countries, meet with peers that develop similar projects, and learn from each other, learn from foreigners that have already landed there, started business, learn with African people also, because there are lots of entrepreneurs there. So I think like networking is really important. So networking within people that work in the same industry as you, but also networking with people that work in governments and institutions, so that you can understand what's a bit more about the mindset of the government. So I would say like networking is one big key, and actually like going to those countries, this is where you like you unlock all those myths and like really discover the reality of things.
Yes, thank you. So that's one of the tips: go to the country, meet the local people, start the conversation.
See by yourself, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next topic, which is what are the untapped opportunities in Africa? Nelson, I would like to ask this question from you. You are a software development company, and you also provide a tech team as a service. How do you go about finding these untapped opportunities in Africa?
I think we all know that almost, or maybe for some of you, almost about 60% of average countries in Africa, I think the average age is about 25 years old. So these are huge numbers of youth people. A lot of them are highly educated. Some of them, like myself, have PhD and a bunch of degrees in technology, some of the rarest. Actually, for one of our clients, they've been looking for a team, an implementation partner team within the Netherlands for like almost 8 months. And within 2 days, we're able to bring together teams of almost about 6 people in those specializations to actually fulfill the job. And that's just an example of it. So like what you mentioned, talent is everywhere, opportunities are not. And a lot of times, people have actually invested to actually self-learn these skills by themselves. But then, so yeah, in terms of opportunities, I think we have, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit distracted with the heavy noise. In terms of opportunities, we have opportunities when it comes to talent and people. And then in terms of also opportunities that I've seen so far is also opportunity in terms of market as well. Personally, as an organization, we've been heavily investing in a lot of technologies. Some we position this technology for the EU market, but actually a lot of our technologies as well, we even see better potential in the African market. For example, now the future will also be a lot in data, a lot of artificial intelligence, and I think where you can actually have a lot of upper hand is actually being able to, especially if you're like a scaling organization or a small organization, you want to have access to resources, and resources are becoming expensive in different parts of the world. But also, there's also need for also access to data and maybe places with low barrier to actually enter in terms of, let's say, some specific kind of assets, and which Africa as a whole actually present those kind of opportunities. So maybe down the line, I can also share some of our use cases and opportunities that we've seen in the market, so that I can give enough time for other people. But I really want to reemphasize again that Africa is one of the most hidden treasure that a lot of people don't know about. But I really also want people to know about it, because it's also not something that I alone or we, the four alone, can actually hack. But we need actually more people to create this kind of awareness, to actually stand together to harness this opportunity to then create a mutual benefit on both sides.
Yes, because you work with tech talent. Can you give the example of the profiles that you find in Africa, which are difficult to find in Europe, but in 2 days you managed to find in 2 or 3 days you managed to find in Africa?
I think some of the rarest skills are maybe like cloud, senior cloud, AWS, or let's say what do you call it? Yeah, senior AWS cloud implementer, or maybe Ajulo, or even sometimes even let's say Odoo implementation as well. People that have those kind of skills, because I think these are people that would go the extra mile, because over here we've got, let's say, training facilities for everything, right? And then you have the mindset that, okay, I need to go to school and study 4 years or 5 years and take this program, take that program to learn these things. But in Africa it's different. People actually, they don't have access to the same kind of infrastructure of education, but these guys, they spend day and night hacking their way through the latest technology. So even before teens become mainstream here, they've picked it up. But you need to also be able to identify and find those people with the right kind of character who also want to, and those are the people that we also connect with and give those opportunities to. Because we also, I think it makes sense to actually look for people that are willing and want to, and actually connect them to the opportunity. And this is where I feel like we actually hold this opportunity redistribution too.
Yes, Marine, what are the untapped opportunities in Africa, the ones that you see?
Well, for us, we are in the energy sector. So there are still, we see big cities with like big urbanization infrastructure, but there are still lots to develop. In some big countries, like in rural areas, but there are also like countries like, for example, Burundi, where we are active at the moment, where only 10% of the population has access to electricity. So there is also like a big market there to develop. So there are big opportunities also, because those countries, they have lots of natural resources. So the technology that we use in those countries are hydroelectricity, so trying to provide like renewable power and make the best use of what Africa can offer.
Thank you. One of you, gentlemen, who wants?
Yeah, I think for us it's a little bit the same. If I look at the business side, there are still a lot of companies, and it's a bit the same also in Europe, but a lot of companies that need to digitize, need to start their transformation journey. And for us as an Odoo partner, there's a lot of opportunity there, only on that side, supporting those companies. But also something we've been talking about quite a lot is I think what you're doing also as well is there's a lot of talent also where we work, the people we work with. And if I see, we pay very well. We have the same salary skills in the Netherlands and in Kenya. So we pay people on what they are worth. But we're quite a bit cheaper than European partners. We deliver the same quality. So I think it's also a big opportunity for us to build teams in Africa and service the European market, but not as outsourcing and we pay them a lot less and then we make a nice profit, but really work with people, pay them the same, but still be very efficient and service the European market.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think for Odoo, for us as an Odoo partner and Odoo, Odoo is the perfect system for the market. There's the pricing, which is perfect for us. The system itself, it's fast, it's easy to use, it's simple to use, it's expandable. We've integrated it with a lot of local solutions. We've integrated with all the mobile money, with SMS, field data collection with Kobo Toolbox. We are now integrating Odoo with tax authorities in Rwanda and Zambia. Actually, we already did that ourselves. So we've also been able to do that ourselves based on Odoo. So we're really able to take this system and make it the system for the markets that we work for. And we've just scratched the surface. And what I really hope, so we won Best Partner twice in a row. I really hope we don't win it next year, because there's so much opportunity. And I would love for more Odoo partners really to thrive in Africa, because there is so much to do.
Yes, you already have competition. So we have Army Strong here present, one of the partners in Angola. We have potential. Yeah, we know who else we're gonna become partners soon.
I love the show off, but that's beautiful.
It's there for the taking. It's there for the taking.
Douwe, just I will ask you to share a little bit how you started your company working with Odoo. I think it's a fascinating story, and one of the first customers that you served, and what you were able to save by implementing Odoo.
So I worked for a company. So I was not an Odoo partner. I worked for a company in Western Kenya, Kakamega, and we supported 30,000 smallholder farmers with inputs on credit. And we had a field staff of around 250 people, and everything was cash. And farmers could pay in like 10 installments, so that's 300,000 cash payments you're collecting from a very big area. And then we looked at various systems, and we decided upon Odoo, and we moved the whole system to Odoo. One of the most amazing things was we said to all those farmers, we will not accept cash anymore, only M-Pesa, mobile money. We did not lose any customers. So all the small farmers were able to go onto M-Pesa and pay with mobile money. Some didn't have a phone, so sometimes 5 farmers had their own SIM cards, and they swapped it in one single phone. But all of them went to mobile money. We digitized the whole logistics, so it was a massive logistics drive. So we had 4 delivery moments a year, 30,000 farmers, bags of fertilizer, bag of seeds. So that was all streamlined with Odoo. And I think estimation in the first year we saved between 100 and 200,000 euros just because the money came in. We didn't lose a lot of the products. Products went to the field, were collected, registered, or came back. And that really opened my eyes. After that, I was a consultant for a few years, and I raised capital for SMEs in Africa. And often we raised capital for companies, and then they needed to spend it on IT. And they couldn't find a good partner, couldn't find a good solution. We also raised money for companies that still worked on Excel. So almost 4 years ago, all of that kind of came together, and we decided to start Advanced Insight. And here we are.
Beautiful story. So you see what's possible in Africa. So if you have any ambition of starting a business, just look where the opportunities are and make the first steps. Patrick, what do you have to add?
Yes, obviously there are plenty of opportunities maybe in industries that we do not serve, in agriculture, in real estate. It's a big thing in Africa so far. But for what is our concern, we are mostly in the IT industry. And there is still a lot to do. Actually, what people are seeing as challenges are actually the opportunities. We were discussing with Douwe a few things, but we came across a couple of interesting ones which we are actually facing. One of them is the possibility to connect a lot of systems together. For example, when you look at the payment landscape in Africa, it's not as easy to operate across countries and to be able to collect payments. So that small SME today that starts as a one-person army that will grow tomorrow to 10, 20 people big and 2 countries, they need to deal with different payment providers because you don't have either a global one or at least a country-wide provider, or because those providers do not communicate with each other with the API. Today you will see some buzzwords like API economy, but it's something that is real. In other territories, in Europe and so on, it's something that is really common. In Africa, you have a lot of developers who will be able to integrate API, but you don't have today Africa-wide players that give you that ease of work. For example, us as Odoo, we are in IT. We collect payment in all of these countries, but we don't have a single source of payment. We need to deal with different people to have so many contracts. So people who will crack that challenge will typically have the whole market. And we are talking again of a market of a few billions people population. Another thing that we see is the access to data and how it can serve people and companies in doing business a better way. For example, one of the things that SMEs are facing in terms of challenge in Africa is access to lending. The underlying reason is if you want to get a loan, you need to be able to pass the credit valuation test. And a good way is to have clean accounting reports, clean finance statements. But if people are not equipped with decent systems like the ERPs we are selling, if people cannot have collaterals like a land that you can put before you get it, and you can guarantee that this actually belongs to me, because there are some issue to that, it becomes an issue. But today you have things like blockchain that can guarantee that if I have this certificate, it actually belongs to me. You have tools like the ones that you are selling, and it's time for me to do publicity, even if I don't need to do so, right? It allows people to be able to show their records, for example, to a banker and to get the loan. But again, this is what also other people do in advanced countries. In Africa, you have people who have understood that and they are really doing well about it. The most famous are the telco companies. We are in Kenya, so we have a famous one, which is called Safaricom. In Belgium, it will be the equivalent of Proximus or something like that. So they are a telecompany, I would say a telco company, but they also do a lot of service, financial services. They allow you to pay using your phone, and everybody today has a phone, so you don't need to invest into something. They don't need to print bank cards that they will send to you by post. It costs money, and you need to renew it when it expires, so they don't need to invest into that. Since you have your phone, since you have a unique identifier, which is actually your number, if you need to take a loan, they can just see your history of transactions and so on, and you can be allowed to get a loan instantly from your couch on a Saturday and so on with some thresholds. If you go in a classical bank, they will ask you for all of those proof of bankability and so on. It goes even further. If you go in the countryside and you need an ATM, obviously maybe there's no electricity, no internet, there's no ATM. Either you starve or you just go to the local small shop, you pay to the owner and they give you the cash. So you kind of have virtual ATMs all around the country. These are opportunities that are available to companies that want to understand how things work, what are the challenges, and how you can provide, I would say, creative solutions to the African context.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Maybe one example is like in Europe we have Ponto, we have Zarttech, we have Enable Banking. And with these tools I can just connect my bank accounts, connect them to Odoo and pull everything in. It's amazing. The first company that will crack this in the African continent at scale will be a unicorn. Because there's so much demand for those kinds of integrations. It's going to be very difficult, a lot of licenses, a lot of technical challenges. But if a company cracks this, if you talk about untapped opportunities, you're going to be a unicorn.
So we heard payment connections, we heard tech talent, we heard here meeting your customer where they are. So Safaricom is one of the solution. Mobile payment has been around for 10 years now. More, 15 years. So can you imagine 15 years ago that we already were making mobile payments in Africa, and Europe some people are still struggling with mobile app. So you see that there is an opportunity there and people are open for the innovation. I just have an additional question for you, Patrick. We have a lot of people in the audience that work for a multinational, for a company, and they have to convince their manager to open something and do something in Africa. How did you went about convincing the management of Odoo to open an office in Africa or to start operating?
If you know the way the management at Odoo works, I'm not sure it will be the good example to recommend. So they are quite trusting and daring. Because the management, and if you take the CEO, is someone who started the company, so he's used to taking risks. But what I can say is, at the end, it's a business decision. So you need to build a case that this is going to be successful. And what we've been explaining is that there is a market, there is an audience, and we have the tools today to operate. So if you are able to show that, I'm pretty sure that the discussion will be a little bit easier to approach. Yeah.
Yes. And what were the tough questions that you got from the manager?
It was not really business related.
Yeah.
It was, do you really want to do this? Do you understand that if you start it, you are almost on your own? So that's why I say the management at Odoo is a little bit special, but obviously we have smart people. People are not crazy. But the most important is to understand if you want to champion this and you want to go full in.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's move on to the next topic, which is the strategies to win big in Africa. So we heard about the opportunities. We heard about the reality versus the myth of doing business in Africa. It's a lot of opportunities. It's a lot to do. What are the practical steps that you can take to actually take advantage of these opportunities? Who is Marine?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, so start building your network there is one important thing. Understand the context, understand where you are going. And for us, the strategy that works is that we have to think long term because we bring projects like we start a project and maybe in 10 years we're going to have finally this plant that will generate electricity and sell to customers. So we have to think big and we have to think long term. So we have really like to, in our industry, like build a resilient strategy. But that's really like very specific to our industry. And also, I think, also understand what are the regulations in the country. That's also one big thing, because sometimes it could be barriers. But I have to say, in Africa, there's always solutions to find. It's not like in Europe when it's a no-go, it's a no-go. In Africa, you can always try to find solutions to counter that. There is always like discussions that are possible. And then I think, there are lots of talents in Africa, skilled ones, and sometimes maybe in our industry we are missing some specific skills, but I think people, you can totally train people, and what you can put in place is also like put systems and processes in place so that people can learn from it, they can own it. So if you do not have like in country those resources that you are looking for, like build a framework so that people can be trained and be performing at what you want them to do.
Yes, thank you very much. You operate in 5 African countries. Do you see, what would you say are the differences entering those 5 countries?
Well, I would say like for our industry, it's a lot about like negotiating with the governments, because those are big infrastructures projects. So we are very impacted by that. So you have to have connections. You have also to understand what are the country needs at the moment. And for example, for us, we are it's working well in Burundi because there is like a real vision from the president and the rest of the government. And we've been able also to gather other partners that are interested in this country. So that's what's really helpful for us and working at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Nelson?
I think maybe an idea would be, I think you've mentioned it, which is localization. To not go in with a perception of, let's say if you're European, to not go in with an European or with a Western mindset. It's a different market, it's a different continent, it's a different expectations. The consumer also expects something different as well. So localization can really help you to navigate. Also localizations in terms of the teams as well. It's also quite important because it's just the same way if I'm I mean, we've got HQ here. I mean, in the Netherlands, and also in the UK, also in the US. Everywhere where we always have localized people because it's always different. It's the same way as well in Africa. So not underestimate it. You also need that localized personnel that understand how things work, the best kind of marketing strategy that appeal to people. Because what appeal to people here is not the same as what appeal to consumers there. So I think that's one thing. And secondly, as well, I think localization will also give the perception as well that the pricing will not be the same, because obviously the difference in the cost of livings vary. So that also means the consumer buying power as well differs. So if you're selling something for a unit of 10 euros in the EU, for example, you shouldn't sell at the same price, because I think extending your services or products to Africa will actually also give you possibility as well to also produce locally, and there you can also make even better impact, because you can also through local production also contribute towards employment opportunities, which also is a social impact correlation to your business, right? But at the same time, it also helps you to also produce at a much more cheaper price, where you can still attain equivalent of your profit margin as to what you have in EU, by also localizing your production as well. Or some of your production that is still possible to localize without losing access to your IP or patent or whatever it is that your business trade that you're trying to maybe secure and guide. And this way, if you have a product or service that is then localized in production or to some extent, then that means you have favorable price for the local market that the buying power can afford. And also, you cannot, if you also localize your human capital to actually make the realization of that business concept possible, then it also help you to navigate the connections to client, to customer, or the way to reposition your product in the best way to the local market there.
Thank you. Douwe?
You need time. You need to take a lot of time. You need to be patient. You need to really invest in getting to know the market where you work. The times that I heard somebody from Europe say, I'm going to set up an SMS service and I'm going to send SMSs to farmers about crops and yields and seeds, and I get 1% of the market, and it's going to be... I've heard that so many times, and I've seen so many of them fail because it just doesn't work. And this, these are people then in Europe and have been maybe to an African country once. It takes a lot of time, and for me personally, why I can now do what I do, I've been working there for 20 years. I've managed companies there. I've been in a situation that the clients we work with are. I had sleepless nights about how to pay my staff, or my containers being locked in the ports, or my fights with tax authorities. And you need to know that reality and be flexible and take the time and adapt, and make sure it stays fun. And I think that sometimes can be quite frustrating and quite challenging. But then if I now look at the team we've been able to build based on that, and I think Jake is sitting right there. So Jake was working with me, I think 8 years ago in Kakamega in Western Kenya. And he's now one of our consultants in Nairobi, and he has made really, really amazing progression. That's amazing to see. And still see those things sometimes, that there's a lot of good stuff. But take your time, get to know the market, get to know the people you work with or you want to start working with. And I think, as you also said, relationships. And we really try to build relationships with the companies that we work with. And also be there in more difficult times. And sometimes we have clients that go through difficult times, but we're still there. And then at a later point, they're doing well again, and they are there again for us. Those would be my main suggestions.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, totally. I think the fundamentals for a company are the same in Europe, America, and Africa. Just to be sure on what it means winning, winning big for us. For us, winning is being able to deliver on our mission in a more efficient way than we were doing, for example, remotely from the central HQ, the office. And what it means is we want to make sure that we are onboarding as many customers at a pace that allows us to cover many people, have SMEs which are operating efficiently and so on. And for us, fortunately, we already have a product that is meeting a demand that exists. So winning big will usually result in two things. You can either innovate or something that doesn't exist, or you can take an offer that exists somewhere else and you bring it to people who need it but who are not benefiting from it. If we take Odoo, that's the case. We had the solution that has been developed over the years. It was already in use in Africa, but in some ways that we wanted to sanitize, I can say. Yesterday I met a gentleman who is working on a very new, I would say, technology. It looks promising. But then when we were discussing with him, and I can share this because we openly discussed, you feel that he was aiming at the African markets, but he was pushing a product that he developed for some years without testing if there is a need on the markets. And at some points, the discussion was to see if we could integrate it with Odoo somehow and so on. But there's no market, there's no proof yet. So I have a technology, and then I need to find a use case. If you have venture capitalists and so on who are, I would say, passionate enough, it can help. But if you are self-funded and so on, you may run out of cash before you find someone to buy what you are doing. So you can stick to the basics, find a niche that has a need that you can serve, and do it maybe in a unique way so that you can be efficient to cope also with some of the issues or the challenges that we are having. At Odoo, for example, we think that we are on the right track because we are offering a tool that is very easy to use. It's a no-brainer. Douwe was talking about some farmers that will use Odoo for some reasons. You don't want them to click 5 times to perform a task. If they can click on 2 buttons maximum, do it. That's one thing. The second thing is we also make the tool affordable to the many. And here I will join Nelson, who talked about localizing the price. So you can see that our price is localized, and for us we try to localize it in line with the local purchasing power, the GDP. But localization goes even beyond just the pricing that we are charging. Sometimes it's in the payment terms you are giving to people. If you have been to some other African countries, you can find someone, let's say, people may eat a lot of, I would say, maize corn, flour, right? Yeah. You can buy a bag of 25 kgs, or you can ask to get just 1 spoon. Are you prepared to open the bag and say, okay, you only need 1 spoon? I'm being extreme, obviously, right? Yeah. If you're prepared to adapt, then you can tap into customers that wouldn't have the budget to buy the bag today, maybe tomorrow if they are patient, but they want that 1 spoon today. It's creative. If you're part of a multinational company, maybe you don't always have the freedom to do so locally, but if you're prepared to consider all of these options, I think you're on the right path.
Great. So we got 4 great advice. Localization, so your feet on the ground. We got from Marine building a network, connections, going out there, visit the country, connect with the people. We got from Douwe is having patience. And from Patrick we have the adaptability. So adapt to the local environment in which you are facing. So for myself, my advice is put a timeline, create a budget and a timeline. Let's say you want to invest 100,000 and you want to do that in 1 year time, you want to see result. I would say double that. Budget 100, double it. Budget 1 year, plan for 1 year, but assume it's gonna take 3 years. So that's one of the advice. So we are ready for the Q&A.
And just use Odoo. If you really wanna win big, just use Odoo.
So we are ready to take the questions from the audience.
You understand why he's best partner?
So I already have one question here from the audience. So we see new generations of talents in Africa. They are growing up in Africa. How do we make sure to improve that they have access to technology and they have access to opportunities? How do we do that?
I can take this. Actually, I think next week I'll be also speaking at an event organized by the Internet Society in the Netherlands. And one of the topic is actually about some of the new European law now that will actually censor also access to internet. I think internet has really played a lot of roles in actually giving people opportunities to self-learn, because actually a lot of people in in the African market. A lot of talent in the African market are people that because people are very. I think people, the whole culture is built in such an entrepreneurial way that you. I think I always say every African is a working entrepreneur. So you're self-learned, you're self-disciplined, and when there's a new kind of technology or things to learn, people go to the internet where you can get access to these free modules or free, let's say for example, my brain is a little bit frozen today, or free open source materials that you can play around with and also see how the logics are and how they're thinking, and also self-learn on those kind of things. But then if we then add to the security of the EU sensor access to some of these technologies or to the internet, it also becomes, it takes us 2 steps backward, right, in terms of those redistribution of opportunity, because there's one side whereby people also I mean, I don't believe in charity, but actually then that equal access are given and the playing field is also more leveled, because I do believe Africans can also help themselves actually, and that's why you see a lot of innovations. You're going to see in the next years to come there will be so much innovations and unicorns that will be coming from Africa as well. But then from the European point of view, if we then also censor some of these assets, then of course it's going to cause some constraint. And we're actually hoping that some of this policy do not go through, because it's going to take us 2 steps backward. So I think maybe access to internet would be an interesting way to actually even further improve the strength of this talent, and also maybe access to quality of the right kind of educations or in-demand skills, because we also notice that some people go to, let's say, university for about 4 or 5 years and they learn things that the job market doesn't demand, because of course we also notice that, let's say, the stakeholders do not really speak to each other, the education policy maker, the university that actually give the modules, and also the people are not aware of what is going on in the job market, so they study the wrong things that is not on demand. So maybe also this kind of access or this knowledge of different stakeholders communicating properly is also quite important to foster.
Yes. I have a question for Marine. Do you think that islands such as Mauritius and Madagascar function in the same way as the mainland Africa? I know you are based in Mauritius for this reason.
Well, there are some similarities where the population is young also in Mauritius, and the population in Mauritius, well, I know more about Mauritius. They don't want to do the same jobs as their parents did. They don't want to work in the sugar canes. Less and less people want to work in hospitality, in hotels and resorts. But now, more the young generation, they want to work now in offices, in service centers, in accounting functions, in the banking system as well. So they want to take those jobs which require, like, I would say, higher skills that are more with, like, technology involved jobs.
Yes.
So I think this is somehow a similarity with what's happening in the in the continent as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Douwe, I will ask you the following question. Which industries in Africa do you see a big future in the coming 5 years?
Agriculture. Agriculture is by far number one, especially if you start also looking at exports. That's a big challenge at the moment.
And how can we go about making agriculture sexy? Because when you hear agriculture, you hear a farmer somewhere.
Yeah, it needs to be taken away from subsistence farming. There's a lot of subsistence farming where people just have a small farm to survive. Yeah. We need to open up markets, much more value addition. So if you have that Mars bar that you buy somewhere in Kenya, the cocoa comes from Ghana, it goes to Europe, it's being processed, and the Mars bar is being sent to Kenya. Value addition is a very, very important aspect there.
Yes, thank you very much. Last question for you, Patrick. What is your vision for Odoo in Africa?
First, it's big. Again, I want to refer to the demographics. We referred to millions of SMEs, 64 million something. Yeah. And all of those needs to be supported the right way. And this is the seat in which we are sitting today. We want to make sure that we can reach out to anyone who needs Odoo. We'll take or borrow something someone says. If today I say I want a BIC, you know what I mean. I want something to write. Yeah. I want every entrepreneur, every manager to say, okay, when I want to digitalize my company, I want an Odoo. As simple as that. And this is what we want to do in Africa, but we want to do it in the many areas where Odoo is present. But then behind there, obviously, there is a lot of work, and this is part of what we are discussing with our colleagues. But we want to make sure that entrepreneurs who are mindful of their business take the tool that can equip them the best, in this case, Odoo.
Yes, thank you very much. We are coming to an end of our panel discussion. I want to thank all the panelists for taking your time and sharing your valuable information and strategy with us. Thank you very much. We are not finished yet. If you want to have a talk, we are going to be there at the bar. Feel free to approach the panelists. I'm also available for questions. Thank you very much for your time.